When Keanu Reeves arrived at the Celeste Grand Hotel, he expected just another industry gala. Empty conversations, forced smiles, and a sea of egos. But lurking in the crowd was Alex Thompson, a 28-year-old journalist known for taking down public figures with sharp, calculated questions. Alex had one goal tonight: expose Keanu. He saw the actor's silver crucifix and knew exactly how to turn it into controversy. He'd done this before, backed his targets into corners, forced them to stumble. But as the first question left his lips, the energy in the room shifted, because Keanu didn't stumble. And by the time the night was over, it wouldn't be Keanu fighting to defend himself. It would be Alex Thompson struggling to survive. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. The ballroom of the Celeste Grand Hotel was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like private constellations, casting golden reflections onto champagne glasses clinking in forced toasts. Men and women glided between marble tables, their smiles as meticulously planned as their designer outfits. Conversations were a ballet of flattery disguised as sophistication, each word carefully chosen to impress someone who could advance careers or seal million-dollar deals. Tonight was a gala event, hosted by a major film production company, proudly carrying the slogan of inclusion and modernity in Hollywood. Officially, it was a gathering to celebrate diversity and progress in the industry. But anyone paying attention could see the truth. It was just another parade of egos. Eyes measured, smiles were weapons, and alliances were formed or shattered with a single handshake. And into this environment walked Keanu Reeves, dressed in a well-tailored black suit, understated yet elegant. Keanu entered the room without hurry, without any need to draw attention. Around his neck rested his silver crucifix, subtly swaying as he moved. Unlike the other guests, there was no ostentation in his presence. He wasn't wearing a watch worth an assistant director's annual salary, nor did he flash an overly confident smile or an exaggerated stance. He didn't need to. As his footsteps echoed against the marble floor, the murmurs in the room shifted slightly. Eyes assessed him, some exchanged polite smiles, acknowledging him with a discreet nod, while others simply observed, intrigued. Keanu Reeves was respected, without a doubt, but he was also a mystery to Hollywood. He avoided unnecessary spotlights, turned down multi-million-dollar contracts for roles that didn't make sense to him, and most curiously, held on to his personal convictions without bowing to the dominant narrative. This night was for those who played the game. Keanu never played. Across the room, Alex Thompson swirled his whiskey glass, eyes locked on the actor. His stare wasn't just one of casual curiosity. He had been waiting for this moment. Alex Thompson was a rising journalist at Sentinel Review, a media outlet known for its progressive stance and sharp-cutting exposes. Young, ambitious, and ruthless, he had already made headlines by exposing politicians, CEOs, and even a few celebrities who, in his view, were still clinging to outdated ideologies. He thrived on dismantling public figures, pushing them to the edge with carefully crafted questions, forcing them into corners where they either folded or exposed themselves. And now, he wanted Keanu. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Keanu Reeves wasn't an easy target. He wasn't a firebrand, nor a conservative warrior, nor someone who courted controversy. But Alex saw something that no one else seemed willing to acknowledge. Keanu Reeves wore a religious symbol around his neck. In progressive Hollywood, a crucifix, that small silver cross, shouldn't mean anything. But Alex knew it did. In an industry that prided itself on reinvention, on leaving behind anything that evoked rigid traditions or religious dogma, Keanu's crucifix was a silent challenge. Alex didn't believe for a second that Reeves wore it by accident. There was a message in it, and he intended to expose that message in a way that would force Reeves to explain himself or back down. A smirk tugged at Alex's lips as he twirled his whiskey glass. He had taken down giants before. Now it was Keanu Reeves' turn. The golden clock on the wall had just passed 10 p.m. when Alex saw his opportunity. Keanu was alone, standing near one of the marble columns, watching the event unfold. He didn't look uncomfortable, but he also made no effort to engage in the empty conversations swirling around him. His eyes simply observed, without judgment, just presence. Alex adjusted the collar of his shirt, downed the last of his whiskey, and started walking toward him. He knew exactly what to ask. This wasn't just about questioning, it was about cornering. As he approached, he forced a friendly smile, though his eyes gleamed with something sharper, more calculated. His phone was already in his hand, recording without Keanu noticing it. "Just then, Keanu, can I ask you a quick question?" Alex Thompson asked. The actor shifted his gaze from the room to Alex, raising his eyebrows slightly, as if assessing him. He gave a small nod, always polite. What Keanu didn't know was that by agreeing, he was stepping into a public trap. Alex took a breath and struck. "You've always positioned yourself as someone progressive, but don't you think wearing a crucifix around your neck at an event like this is a bit outdated?" The words were spoken in a measured tone, yet loud enough for people nearby to stop talking. Keanu remained unmoved. Sensing he had cast the perfect bait, Alex pressed forward. "I mean, Hollywood is evolving. Religious symbols carry controversial meanings. Don't you think it's time to leave them in the past?" Silence. The crowd stilled. Some exchanged glances. A young actress in the corner smirked slightly, as if enjoying the spectacle. Others simply watched, waiting to see how Keanu would respond. The weight of the question hung in the air. Keanu blinked slowly, his dark eyes studying Alex without haste. He didn't seem surprised or offended, but there was something in the way he held his wine glass, in the calm rhythm of his breathing, that suggested his response wasn't going to be what Alex expected. The silence became unbearable, and then Keanu opened his mouth. Keanu blinked slowly, as if deciding whether it was even worth responding. The silence stretched unbearably, and then he spoke. The silence following Alex Thompson's question was thick with tension. The ballroom of the Celeste Grand Hotel, once filled with trivial conversations and rehearsed toasts, now felt like a stage where everyone was waiting for the next act. Keanu Reeves didn't respond immediately. He simply took a deep breath, his eyes locked onto the young reporter, studying him. Time seemed to stretch between them, and this lack of urgency was enough to make Alex slightly uneasy. Keanu wasn't a man who engaged in unnecessary confrontations, but he was also not someone who shied away from difficult conversations. And yet, he knew exactly what was happening here. More importantly, he knew what was coming next. Keanu blinked slowly, as if deciding whether it was even worth responding. The silence stretched unbearably, and then he spoke. The silence following Alex Thompson's question was thick with tension. The ballroom of the Celeste Grand Hotel, once filled with trivial conversations and rehearsed toasts, now felt like a stage where everyone was waiting for the next act. Keanu Reeves didn't respond immediately. He simply took a deep breath, his eyes locked onto the young reporter, studying him. Time seemed to stretch between them, and this lack of urgency was enough to make Alex slightly uneasy. Keanu wasn't a man who engaged in unnecessary confrontations, but he was also not someone who shied away from difficult conversations. And yet he knew exactly what was happening here. More importantly, he knew what was coming next. The words were carefully calculated. Alex wasn't just asking a question, he was pushing for a reaction. His tone carried an implicit message. Either you conform to what we expect, or you're part of the problem. And everyone in the room understood it. The ballroom remained tense. Around them, the reactions varied. A group of young actors exchanged glances, waiting to see if Keanu would react defensively. A veteran actress, known for her progressive activism, raised an intrigued eyebrow, observing the scene. An older producer murmured something to a colleague, as if he already foresaw that this could end badly for Alex. Keanu, however, didn't rush to answer. He simply lifted his wine glass to his lips, took a slow sip, and only then returned his attention to Alex. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Tell me, Alex, since when did believing in something become a problem?" The question was simple, but in the context in which it was asked, it flipped the game entirely. Now, the burden of the provocation was on Alex. Alex hadn't expected that response. He had prepared for a defensive reaction, maybe even a generic statement about freedom of expression or respect for diverse beliefs, but he hadn't expected to be put on the defense himself. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. "I'm not saying faith is a problem," he countered quickly, forcing a smile as if to regain control. "But the cross, it's been used as a symbol of oppression throughout history. Do you really think that represents you?" Alex believed this was his winning move. The word oppression was a powerful trigger. Any response Keanu gave could be twisted in some way, but Keanu wasn't rattled. He let a brief silence settle again, his gaze never wavering. And then he responded, with the ease of a man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "Faith doesn't oppress, Alex. People oppress. The problem isn't the cross around my neck, it's what people do with what they believe in." It was a precise, devastating counterstrike. The crowd reacted immediately. There were murmurs among the guests. Someone discreetly nodded, while others seemed to be reconsidering the stance they had taken just moments before. Alex could feel his narrative slipping away. He needed to regain control, so he did something more aggressive. Alex leaned slightly forward, his voice now carrying an irritation that was no longer so well hidden. "With all due respect, Keanu," he began, but his tone suggested there was no respect at all. This was his last move. "Wearing that crucifix at a Hollywood event is like saying we're stuck in the past. We're evolving. Do you really think religious symbols still have a place in modern society?" The attack was now direct, blunt. There were no more subtle jabs. Alex wanted a defensive response, something he could use against Keanu. But instead of being intimidated, Keanu just smirked slightly. "Do you think kindness, hope, and love have become obsolete?" It was a perfect counterattack. The question not only dismantled Alex's accusation, but also made it clear that faith wasn't outdated. It was essential. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Someone muttered, "He has a point." Alex felt the shift in the room. He was losing his audience. Desperate, Alex lost his patience, and then he made a mistake. "People from your generation had it easy," he spat out, his tone now filled with thinly veiled contempt. "It's easy to talk about faith when you've never had to fight for anything." It was as if time stopped. The ballroom fell into a dead silence. Everyone knew Alex had gone too far. Keanu simply took a deep breath. For a moment, the only sound was the faint clink of a glass being set on a table in the distance. And then, with a slow shake of his head and a small smile somewhere between disbelief and quiet amusement, Keanu began to speak. Keanu shook his head, a smirk of disbelief playing on his lips, and then he started speaking. The silence that settled over the Celeste Grand Hotel was suffocating. Alex Thompson, his face slightly flushed from his own mistake, realized what he had done. His last provocation. "It's easy to talk about faith when you've never had to fight for anything," had come out more aggressive than he had intended. The moment the words left his mouth, he felt the weight of them. Now, everyone was looking at Keanu Reeves. The stares weren't just filled with curiosity, there was expectation. Because at that moment, Alex was no longer just a journalist challenging an actor. He was a man who had exposed himself, revealing his own arrogance and ignorance in front of everyone. Keanu took a deep breath, and instead of snapping back, he smiled. Not a smirk, not a look of superiority. It was the smile of a man who had heard this kind of argument before and knew exactly how to answer it. Keanu held his wine glass for a moment, watching the liquid swirl inside the crystal. He didn't look at Alex with anger, contempt, or even impatience. He looked at him like someone who knew something Alex didn't. And then he spoke. "Easy." Keanu repeated the word as if tasting its weight. "You think my life has been easy?" Alex swallowed hard. Keanu paused, locking eyes with the journalist before continuing. "I've been rejected in more auditions than you can count." The audience stood still. "I've slept on borrowed couches because I couldn't afford rent." Keanu's voice wasn't loud, but it was firm and inescapable. Alex couldn't interrupt. "I've lost people I loved. My best friend died of an overdose. The woman I loved was killed in a car accident. My daughter died before she was even born." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Alex turned pale. He didn't know. He hadn't researched that part of Keanu's life before attacking him. He only saw the successful actor, the man respected and admired by Hollywood and audiences worldwide. He had no idea about the weight Keanu carried. "Do you think faith kept me standing because my life was easy?" Keanu continued, his voice now carrying something deeper. "No, Alex. Faith kept me standing because my life was hard." The impact of those words was absolute. The ballroom, once eager to witness a clash, was now completely silent. Keanu hadn't raised his voice, but he had won. Alex tried to speak, but nothing came out. He was used to fast-paced interviews and political confrontations where he could control the flow of the conversation. But here, in front of Keanu Reeves, he had no control. Because this was no longer about ideology. Now it was about real life, and Keanu wasn't playing a game. He was simply telling the truth. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Alex turned pale. He didn't know. He hadn't researched that part of Keanu's life before attacking him. He only saw the successful actor, the man respected and admired by Hollywood and audiences worldwide. He had no idea about the weight Keanu carried. "Do you think faith kept me standing because my life was easy?" Keanu continued, his voice now carrying something deeper. "No, Alex. Faith kept me standing because my life was hard." The impact of those words was absolute. The ballroom, once eager to witness a clash, was now completely silent. Keanu hadn't raised his voice, but he had won. Alex tried to speak, but nothing came out. He was used to fast-paced interviews and political confrontations where he could control the flow of the conversation. But here, in front of Keanu Reeves, he had no control. Because this was no longer about ideology. Now it was about real life, and Keanu wasn't playing a game. He was simply telling the truth. The look wasn't one of anger. It was one of compassion, and that unsettled Alex more than any answer Keanu could have given. Because deep down, Alex knew he hadn't just lost the debate. He had lost the respect of the room. Keanu set his glass down on a nearby table, adjusted his suit discreetly, and before walking away, he said something that sealed the conversation for good. "Having faith doesn't mean avoiding hard questions. It means knowing who you are, even when everyone around you tries to change you." He gave a small, effortless smile and added, "And I know exactly who I am, Alex. Do you know who you are?" Boom. That question needed no answer. Alex didn't respond. He just stood there, holding his phone, not knowing what to do with it. Keanu, on the other hand, simply turned away, resuming his previous conversation as if nothing had happened. He didn't need to win. He already had. Alex looked around, searching for an ally, but all he found were indifferent expressions. He was already a defeated man. Alex Thompson was out of options. The Celeste Grand Hotel ballroom, once a stage where he controlled the narrative, was now a silent courtroom where he was the only defendant. The gazes around him were not supportive. They were judging him. He could feel the coldness in the forced smiles, the low murmurs that revealed his attempt to expose Keanu Reeves had failed miserably. And the worst part, Keanu hadn't even tried to win. He had simply told the truth, and the truth alone was enough to make Alex look small. But Alex wasn't going down without a fight. If he was falling, he was going to fall swinging. He was still holding his phone, still recording. Maybe he could turn this around. Maybe there was still a way to edit the conversation and spin it into something useful. But first, he needed one last move. Alex took a deep breath and tried to compose himself. He forced a short smile, crossed his arms, and threw out what he thought could be his redemption. "So, Keanu," he began, trying to keep his tone casual, "if faith is so important to you, why don't we ever hear you talking about it publicly? Why do you hide what you believe in?" A chill ran through the room. This time, Alex wasn't attacking the cross. He was attacking Keanu's integrity. He wanted to plant an idea in people's minds that Keanu was a hypocrite, that his faith wasn't something genuine, but something he avoided discussing because he was afraid of the consequences. It was a risky last move. Because if Keanu Reeves had been like most Hollywood actors, this would have been the moment he crumbled, humbled. But Keanu wasn't like most actors. The actor tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing Alex in a new light, and then he smiled. "Who said I'm hiding it?" he asked, unhurried. Alex frowned, caught off guard. Keanu continued, "Talking about something all the time doesn't mean you believe in it more. It just means you want other people to know you believe." Alex had no comeback. Keanu took a step closer, but not in a threatening way. His tone remained calm, but now there was a quiet firmness to it. "My faith isn't a speech, it's not a strategy, and it's certainly not a performance for me to put on every time someone wants me to prove something." He paused, letting the words settle in. Then he finished, "Faith isn't meant to be displayed, it's meant to be lived." But Keanu wasn't like most actors. The actor tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing Alex in a new light, and then he smiled. "Who said I'm hiding it?" he asked, unhurried. Alex frowned, caught off guard. Keanu continued, "Talking about something all the time doesn't mean you believe in it more. It just means you want other people to know you believe." Alex had no comeback. Keanu took a step closer, but not in a threatening way. His tone remained calm, but now there was a quiet firmness to it. "My faith isn't a speech, it's not a strategy, and it's certainly not a performance for me to put on every time someone wants me to prove something." He paused, letting the words settle in. Then he finished, "Faith isn't meant to be displayed, it's meant to be lived." Alex felt a weight in his chest, because deep down, he knew Keanu was right. He knew he had entered this conversation with arrogance, believing he could ridicule a man simply because he wore a religious symbol. But all he had done was expose himself as someone shallow, someone who believed in nothing, and worse, someone who didn't know who he was. Alex looked around, searching for an ally, but he found nothing but indifference. The people who had seemed engaged in his interview no longer looked at him. It was as if he wasn't even there anymore, as if, in the eyes of the crowd, he no longer mattered. Alex swallowed hard, and without another word, he turned off his phone and slipped into the crowd. He knew that night would haunt him forever, and the worst part, he knew he deserved it. Keanu Reeves simply smiled slightly, as if that conversation had been nothing more than a passing moment. He didn't look victorious. He didn't look proud. He just looked at peace, like someone who had simply done what he always did, be himself. He turned back to his conversation with a close friend, completely unbothered by Alex's departure, completely detached from the moment. Because, in the end, Keanu Reeves didn't need to prove anything to anyone, and that was the real lesson of the night. A voice from the back of the room murmured, "Some people try to tear others down. Keanu just showed he's unbreakable." The silence still lingered in the Celeste Grand Hotel as Alex Thompson vanished into the crowd. He tried to slip away unnoticed, avoiding the eyes that just moments ago had been eager to see him take down Keanu Reeves. Now they ignored him. He was no longer the bold journalist who exposed public figures. He was the man who had been completely dismantled, and worse, in front of all of Hollywood's elite. Conversations resumed quickly, the clinking of glasses, the forced laughter, the background music. Everything carried on as if nothing had happened. Keanu Reeves simply continued his night. He went back to chatting with old friends, raised a toast with a British producer, and even chuckled at a joke someone made about the cheap wine being served. Anyone looking at him now would never have guessed he had just walked away from a public confrontation. For Keanu, there had been no war to win, no game to play, and perhaps that was what humiliated Alex the most. Because while Keanu moved on effortlessly, Alex felt like his career was over. Alex knew he couldn't just leave. He had connections here. He still needed to pretend he hadn't just been humiliated. So he did what he could. He tried to blend in. He grabbed another whiskey, attempted to join some conversations, cracked a few jokes, but no one seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. The reactions were always the same. A sympathetic look but no engagement. A polite smile but no real interest. A glance exchanged between colleagues as if saying, better not associate with him right now. Because Hollywood doesn't forgive weakness, and Alex was now a weak man. But the worst was yet to come. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Trending topic, Keanu destroys reporter on live video. He opened Twitter. The videos were already up, multiple angles. People had been recording the conversation without him noticing. And the comments were even worse than he imagined. The journalist tried to take down Keanu, but Keanu didn't even need to lift a finger. Alex Thompson getting obliterated in real time. He's never recovering from this. Did this guy seriously think he could take on Keanu? Amateur move. The part that hit me the most. Faith isn't meant to be displayed. It's meant to be lived. Damn Keanu. The reactions were always the same. A sympathetic look but no engagement. A polite smile but no real interest. A glance exchanged between colleagues as if saying, better not associate with him right now. Because Hollywood doesn't forgive weakness, and Alex was now a weak man. But the worst was yet to come. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He looked at the screen and felt his stomach drop. Trending topic, Keanu destroys reporter on live video. He opened Twitter. The videos were already up, multiple angles. People had been recording the conversation without him noticing, and the comments were even worse than he imagined. The journalist tried to take down Keanu, but Keanu didn't even need to lift a finger. Alex Thompson getting obliterated in real time. He's never recovering from this. Did this guy seriously think he could take on Keanu? Amateur move. The part that hit me the most. Faith isn't meant to be displayed. It's meant to be lived. Damn Keanu. He didn't leave as the fearless journalist who asked the tough questions. He left as the man who tried to humiliate Keanu Reeves and got completely destroyed. And he knew that this would be his reputation for a long time, maybe forever. A voice from the back of the room murmured, "Some people try to tear others down. Keanu just showed he's unbreakable." Alex Thompson wandered through the Celeste Grand Hotel ballroom aimlessly, gripping a whiskey glass he didn't even want to drink. He was no longer the ruthless journalist. Now he was the man everyone avoided. Conversations flowed around him as usual, but every time he passed by a group, eyes shifted away, voices lowered. He didn't need to hear what they were saying. He already knew. Shame burned in his skin. He had never felt this before. He had challenged politicians, CEOs, actors. He had taken down powerful figures with his sharp questions. But this time, he wasn't the predator. He was the prey, and Keanu Reeves hadn't even needed to attack. Alex made his way to the bar where the bartender, polite but indifferent, poured him another whiskey. He took a sip. The alcohol burned his throat but offered no comfort. He was alone, completely alone. An actress he knew walked past him without making eye contact. A director he had worked with before gave him a forced nod but quickly moved on. No one wanted to be associated with him now, because no one wanted to be the next one humiliated.